Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, moms and dads, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles and cousins, of course, and mops and pops, or nanas and papas, depending on which one you prefer, and baseball fans everywhere. Welcome to this edition of the Valley Baseball League podcast. Hello, everyone. My name is Graham Knight. I am here on behalf of the league and the teams, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight. I have to admit that I come to you tonight wearing a little egg, and some people would say a lot of egg on my face, because about a year ago, I called up Shenandoah University. I was trying to find sponsors for the Valley Baseball League. I managed to talk to a guy named Scott Musa. I know all of you in the Valley Baseball League know what I'm about to admit to you, but I don't mind saying I can really be stupid sometimes. So here goes. So I call up Scott. I'm trying to tell him all about the league. I'm trying to, come on, Scott, this is what we do. I know you want to be part of it. He says something like, well, I know about the Valley League, and, I'm just going to pass this time. And so I hang up the phone, kind of scratching my head. I'm like, I just don't understand. Fast forward about a year, and I'm in a conversation looking for some data. As you know, we spoke to Chaz Weaver a little while ago, and Chaz is looking for some data for a new book he's writing. And he says, I do a little digging. I talked to John Leonard about it, and he says, oh, Scott Musa may have that. And I'm thinking, Scott Musa, I know that name. It turns out the Scott Musa I was trying to sell in the Valley Baseball League is none other than the sports and media relations director who was there prior to Jimmy McCumber. And it's my pleasure to welcome him to the show today. Scott, forgive me for being such a knucklehead, but it's great to have you here. And you are the guy who is considered to be the one that took the Valley Baseball League into the 21st century when it came to technology. Tell me how you came to be involved in the league.
Well, first, Graham, thank you for having me on the podcast. And I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down and talk to you about the VBL. It was a good time in my life to be involved with the league for a couple of years. And you shouldn't feel bad about maybe not remembering it. That just shows you how quickly things turn. I was involved in the league from I think 2009 through 2011 or 12, and it's like, hey, that's like an eternity ago. Most of the guys in the league now, they weren't even playing little league ball back then. So it's no shame to not remember or not know that I was involved in the league at that point. And I got involved. I've been in Winchester since August of 1992. Been a lifelong baseball fan. Huge Mets fan, so the last couple of years hasn't been a heck of a lot of fun. But when I got here to the Valley, or got to Winchester to start working at Shenandoah, I met a guy named Todd Thompson, who back then, when the Valley League had owners before they switched their model to a not-for-profit and using boards of directors, Todd was an owner of the Winchester Royals, and so kind of knew what was going on, and we did some things together with Shenandoah and the Royals to try to help each other out and save on costs and stuff, because we shared Bridgeforth Field, which we do to this day. And so, just kind of knew about the league and gained a lot of respect for the summer collegiate baseball circuit and the high quality of baseball that was being played in the Valley. And so I kind of knew about it from that. And then as Shenandoah's program got better, we had more and more guys involved in the VBL. And not so much in Winchester occasionally, but we had more guys seem like playing down at Front Royal with the Cardinals, just because we might have an assistant coach at Shenandoah who was involved with the Royals. And so you can't play with the guy that coached you in the winter or during the collegiate season. And so we had some guys playing in Front Royal, maybe Woodstock, that type of thing. And so, as we were going on through, I kind of knew what was going on. And when Kevin Warner, who's now an assistant AD at James Madison, when he decided to give up being the sports media relations director, the league approached me and asked me if I wanted to be involved. And so I did it. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that, because it is a lot of work. And you were doing it in the day before. It was maybe, I don't know, is it fair to say that technology simplified it? That might be a misnomer. Talk to us about pre-technology days and what it was like, and then talk a little bit about it wasn't necessarily an easy task to take the league into the 21st century and put them onto computer systems, was it?
Well, we were really fortunate. Everybody in the league was doing computerized statistics using a program that still most of us in the collegiate space use, Stat Crew. And so it's a little bit quirky. It's a DOS based program, which is a program that's probably, or a piece of software that's 30 years old, and it hasn't been updated in a heck of a long time. But the one thing about it was it works, and so just about everybody was using that, and so that was good. If I had to re-plug in box scores and stuff like that after every game, then you could have paid me $1 million and it wouldn't have been worth it. And I wouldn't have had the time to do that. And so when I came on, one of the things that we did was we switched to a content management system from the previous website system that we had used. And I was actually doing this in the midst of the same process at Shenandoah at the time. And so I kind of was able to, as I learned about it, I was like, all right, I brought that back to the people in the VBL, the owners, and say, all right, here are the two competing groups that we're going to do that. And we ended up going with Presto Sports. And I did the same thing at Shenandoah, got involved in that. And that made it a heck of a lot easier. We were able to customize it to what we needed. And it made the updating of statistics and rosters and everything like that, it made it much, much more streamlined. It made the job a heck of a lot easier. I would say the job that Kevin had was very different than the job that I had. And then moving forward, what John and what Jimmy have been doing since they moved to Point Streak is even different than what I did. Having Jimmy McCumber is a colleague of mine. He has the same job basically down at Bridgewater College. And he and I were kind of talking about it a little bit when he took it over. And he says, well, we don't do this and we don't do that from when you were here. So it's a heck of a lot easier. But that's fine because everybody kind of puts their own stamp on it and makes it the most efficient way for them to do the job.
Right. Now, one of the things I'd always heard about the league when I came in was that, partially sponsored by Major League Baseball. It seems like all of the teams, so there are 12 leagues in the National Alliance of Collegiate Summer Baseball, all of whom are partially sponsored by Major League Baseball. I was always told that Major League Baseball requires the teams to keep, and the leagues to keep, a certain stats so that the scouts and the league can follow the players. For sports fans out there who, they get to come to the games, they see what the players do, they take advantage of the websites, but they don't know what the backbone of that looks like. Do you mind sharing a little bit of the lifestyle, what it's like for a sports media director, what actually takes to pull it off so we all can, watch the stats almost live as the games take place?
Well, the first thing about it is you have to have great internet. You've got to have a good connection and good speed. Especially this better than just about anybody. The upload speeds for video now really have taken that's a tremendous amount of bandwidth that you need to be able to go upload and download. And so, some of the leagues or some of the cities and some of the ballparks, that was always a challenge to get the internet out there. So the first thing you need, obviously, is a good internet connection that's going to be reliable, that you're going to be able to use night in and night out, no matter what the weather is like, and that type of thing.
Right.
So once you get it there, and then you've got a system where when I was there, they were using Stat Crew, and then clunky is not a really fair word, but I think it is cumbersome. There's a couple of steps, a couple of hoops that you have to jump through you put the lineups in, you start the game, and you have to start a couple of different pieces of software to get to read that system that you're scoring, and then spit it out onto the internet in a format that people can view. And so now at Point Streak, all of that's included in one spot. It's completely web-based. They go in there, they score the game, and then everything is updated afterward. What I used to have to do was I would get an email from each one of the games each night, and I'd have to import that, and it would go, and I'd have to reconcile rosters, which was sometimes that would be a little bit cumbersome. You'd get a guy maybe who changed a jersey number, or they had maybe their name was spelled incorrectly by a scorekeeper for one reason or another.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had to make sure that you had that correct, because you don't want to have Graham Knight have playing in 20 games and Graham Knights playing in one game when it's the same guy. And then, of course, everybody that behind a keyboard seems to be very bold, and they're not real patient with mistakes like that, because it seems that sticks out like a sore thumb. Like, how could you make that mistake? Like, get that fixed. John, you're costing my kid a chance at playing professional baseball. Right. And so you've got to be your attention to detail has to be very, very sound there, and you have to be exact on everything, because if it's not right, people are going to hammer on you. The other part of it is there's a wide disparity in the ability of people to score games. Baseball, it's America's pastime. And so there is a lot of people out there who understand game scoring on a very high level. And if you don't get it right, if you have something that's, not in the rule book, you're going to hear about it. And so I was always the backstop for the scorers. I'd go back through a box score and I would look and see, all right, was an RBI credited on a 2-out error? So there shouldn't be an RBI there. And so you got to take that stuff away. I remember, and I think, Todd Thompson at Winchester, he would chuckle at this memory. There was a game where Winchester was losing, and they were the home game. They were losing in, let's say it's the 6th inning. And in the top of the 6th, the team that they were playing, let's say the score was 4-3. And the team in the top of the 6th scored 4 more runs. And then in the middle of the inning, the game was canceled. So everybody thinks that the score reverts back to the top of the 6th, or before those 4 runs were scored, but that's not actually the case. If the runs can count, as long as it doesn't change the outcome of the game. So the final score of that game was 8-3. And I remember telling Todd, I was like, no, like, you got to give me everything that happened in that inning. He's like, that's not the rule. And I'm like, actually it is. He's like, well, where is it? And I'm like, I don't know. It's in the rule book, but it's there. And he went back and looked. And Todd, to his credit, he wanted to understand. He went back. He found that rule. He was like, I never knew that. And those are the kinds of things you've got to be on top of, because those kids that in the top of the 6th inning, I know I was making light of it, but they actually went out and earned those statistics. The kid, he had a 2-out double and he drove in 3 runs, let's say. That was important to that kid, and we need to credit that if that's actually what happened in the ball game, and he's deserving of that credit. You've got to make sure you do a good job with that kind of stuff.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And it means a lot of late nights. I just, what I really wanted people on this podcast to appreciate is kind of how much effort goes into the stuff that happens outside of the baseball diamond, keeping track of all the stats, organizing the uniforms, the host families, all that stuff. We just did a podcast with Austin Gisriel, who wrote the Safe at Home book. And Austin followed the team for a year, and he said, as soon as the season ends, they're starting the next one, scouting for next year's team and coaches meetings and all that stuff. And so I don't think the average person hears about the sports media relations director. But, as you said, when we were talking before the podcast, there are a lot of late nights and a lot of work goes into it. And, it does take a toll.
The games end at, the games start at 7:00. And if everything goes well, 2.5, 3 hours are going to start ending around 10. But it could go as late as midnight, let's say if there's rain or something like that. And the way that the model was set up was the league wanted me to have everything updated by 10:00 in the morning. But I was like, I want to have it done that night. So I might stay up till midnight, 12:30, 1:00 to have it all done. And so when somebody got up in the morning, they would be able to see updated statistics and standings and everything like that. And then I didn't have any work to do in the morning, because inevitably the first thing that I would deal with in the morning was roster changes. A kid got hurt, so they went home, they brought somebody new in, what have you. And there were teams in the league that were not afraid to make roster changes. If things were not going well, they'd cut a bunch of guys and bring some new guys in. And so, you on a roster that might have 26, 28 guys, you might run through 40 or 50 by the end of the season, because they're just, guys are shuffling in and out, and every one of those guys has to be recorded. You have to, and there's a process that goes into it. Like I talked about, like there's the website roster, and then you'd have to do the same thing with the statistics, and you got to make sure that, like I said, you spell everything correctly, and you're getting it out to that night's opponents. All right, here are the correct rosters for tonight, and you might really run it right up to like a 5 o'clock deadline. I can't even remember. I'm sure I lost count of the times I left work around 5 o'clock, and my phone would still be dinging. Oh, here's another roster change. And they were trying to get him in right before the deadline so the kid would be eligible to play that night.
Right. Hey, so we were recently talking, so much I want to talk to you about. Let's talk a little bit about the concept of baseball internship. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about the changes that are, what you can tell us about what may happen with Bridgeforth Field. We were recently talking to Brian O'Connor, now head coach down at UVA. He was a Harrisonburg Turk back in the 90s. Anyway, we had a nice chat with him, and one of the things he was talking about was, he sees these the summer leagues as a chance for these players to go on their baseball internship. His idea of it is you want to get kids out of their comfort zone into a new situation where they get a chance to do a lot of reps, experience something new, definitely maybe off balance a little bit because they're in a new environment. When you were talking earlier about you guys tended to send your players, say, more to Front Royal or someplace else, I get that there might have been a coaching conflict there. But what was the kind of thought for, where sending players into the summer leagues and also kind of where to place them? Did you want them in their home environment? Were you looking to give them some new landscape? What was the thought process there?
I think, I know that you had talked about having Coach Anderson on a future podcast, a VBL Hall of Famer. And I think, Kevin would be this would be a very appropriate question for him, but in watching the way he does it, he wants to put his kid at the most appropriate level. If he's got a kid who's pretty talented, who he thinks can benefit from playing a summer in a wood bat league against Division I competition, maybe some younger guys from Division I, which seems to be what the VBL has skewed to the last couple of years. But guys in the ACC might be a midweek starter, might be a reliever, a redshirt freshman, a sophomore, that type of thing. You get those, then they're gonna stick them in that league. But if they're not at that level, they might go to the Rockingham County League or the Griffith League. That was something when I was involved in the VBL. That was when they were doing all-star games against the Clark Griffith League. And that was a big deal because that was a way for the two leagues to kind of compare themselves against one another, best against best, and then see who had the better talent. It's a tough situation. Like Coach O'Connor said, it's an internship, so you want the kids to go out there and have a good experience. You want them to get playing time. It'd be a terrible deal if you sent a guy out to play for the summer and all he did all year long was take batting practice and maybe infield, outfield before games and didn't actually get live at bats. That's really, really important, is to see live pitching or if you're a pitcher, obviously throw against hitters in a live situation as opposed to working on the side. And so that's a big part of it. Find out where a kid can go, can play, and then have a little success. And yes, get outside their comfort zone a little bit and hopefully, learn the game from a different perspective, from a different coach, and go out there and hopefully bring something back to their game that they can improve upon for the next year.
Yeah, it's funny. We were recently talking to Sam Perlazzo, who was a Newmarket Rebel, obviously went on most notably to be manager of the Baltimore Orioles. He was talking a little bit about that same thing where the goal is, and part of what I want to do in these podcasts is kind of talk and touch on team building and skill development. And one of the things Sam was talking about was exactly what you mentioned, Scott, is the idea that you want to take these players and, it's a bit about competition, turn up the heat, put them into, can they play with the, more intense pressure, faster pitching, all of that stuff. Tell you what, we're going to take a short break here real quick. We're talking to Scott Musa, who used to be the sports media relations director for the Valley Baseball League. We'll be back in just a second after this word from our sponsor. All right, baseball fans, I really hate to interrupt this conversation, but there are 3 important pieces of business I have to get to. Have to. First, please subscribe, like, and share us. Really super important to get the word out about the Valley Baseball League. We're in the top 10 of all summer collegiate-based wood bat leagues. We're in the National Alliance of Collegiate Summer Wood Bat Leagues. It's a alliance of 12 leagues, including the Cape Cod League. We're one of only a few leagues sponsored by Major League Baseball. We want to let people know what's happening in the Valley, what's good about this organization, and why they want to be involved. So help us do that. Also, if you've got any questions, comments, thoughts, please share them. We'd love to hear from you. vbleague@isomermedia.com. That's vbleague@isomermedia.com. And I would be absolutely remiss if I did not pay tribute to our great sponsor, Grace Burrows. The two last years, I'm not sure if that's a sentence, but it sounds kind of cool. The 2 last years of Valley Baseball League live streams would not have happened if it were not for the contributions and support of Grace Burrows. Here's her latest book. If you haven't gotten it, support her by reaching out and getting it. It's a great read. She's a great writer. I'm happy to say I was one of her first readers. Anyway, take a look. All right. Now it's time to get back to the conversation. We're back, the Valley Baseball League podcast, talking with Scott Musa. We've been talking about the Valley League and his time here as the sports media director, but want to kind of move into modern day. Scott, you are now with Shenandoah. Tell everybody what your current position is and what that means on a day-to-day basis.
So I'm the associate athletic director at Shenandoah. So in addition to the stuff that that's related to the sports media relations, like that I do, I work with all the teams in that manner. I do have a full-time assistant, so I have a couple of sports that Sydney Anderson, my assistant, takes care of on a primary basis. That's still a big part of my job, but I am part of the senior leadership team of the athletic department of the administration, and I have direct supervision over 4 different coaches in 5 different sports. So men's soccer, men's basketball, men's women's golf, and women's lacrosse. I'm the primary supervisor for those coaches, and so I'm kind of intimately involved in the day-to-day aspects of their sports.
Well, that sounds fun. Talk to us a little bit about how the pandemic affected sports at Shenandoah University. Where were the teams when the pandemic hit, and how did it affect them on a personal level?
On a personal level, it was rough for all of our student athletes. It was one of those situations where we ran the gamut. Our baseball team, which was a top 10 program again this season, they were off to a great start. They were playing Salisbury University on the day everything kind of went down, where the NCAA announced that they had canceled winter and spring championships, and that effectively ended everything for us. So they actually had to come back. They were on the road at Salisbury. They were going to take the Bay Bridge Tunnel and go down to Virginia Wesleyan for an ODAC weekend series. They're going to play Friday, Saturday, and come back. But they ended up coming back on that Friday morning because that was it. We were kind of shutting everything down for a couple of weeks. Our softball team was playing at home that day. And, in between games of the doubleheader, I'd kind of found out about it during the first game. And I went down to our coach, Courtney Moore, and I was like, hey, Court, I think you need to get your seniors in this second game because I don't know that we're going to be able to play again. And, to her credit, she went out there and did that, ended up finishing off a sweep to finish off with a 7-game winning streak, which was really nice for her in her first season. But the one that really crushed me on a personal level, we had a senior in our indoor track, Elijah Morton. He had qualified for the national championships in the 60-meter dash, the the indoor version of the 100. And so he was in the running to be the fastest man in the country in Division III. And he was literally pulled off the track down in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They were down there. They were practicing for the national championships, which was going to start the next day. And that's when the NCAA pulled the plug on everything. And so Elijah had to come home, and he did not get an opportunity to compete in the national championships. And that's the kind of stuff on a personal level you really feel for the kids, because it just, their dream was literally snatched away from them right before they had their chance to go out there and do it.
Right. Wow, that is painful to hear. I know it's affected people in many different ways, and I'm sorry to hear that. Let's do this real quick, kind of wrap this up on, speaking of, indoor 100 meters. Shenandoah now has this amazing field house. What can you tell us about the baseball facility? I've seen some headlines in the Winchester Star. Is there anything you can tell us about what may or may not happen over at Jim Burnett Park and with the baseball facility?
Sure. So I want to give credit to Bob Kiesler, our assistant vice president, or our vice president for administration and finance. Bob, actually, we had been desiring to build a ballpark somewhere in Winchester. We've had some land down Route 522 that we were looking at developing, and we wanted to build a baseball softball complex, and the cost was going to be pretty prohibitive. And Bob said, why don't we take this money and approach the city of Winchester and offer to put some money into the current fields that we use and take over the management of those fields. It was something that our president, Dr. Tracy Fitzsimmons, worked on with the mayor, and Mitch Moore, our our senior VP. He's the one who took the lead on it and talking to the city and the Parks Department, and they worked very, very hard. Mitch and Lynn Miller from the city, they're the guys that kind of hammered out this agreement. So we've got a 40-year agreement with the city of Winchester to take over the management, and that's really the important part of this. We didn't take over we didn't take over the ownership of the fields by any stretch of the imagination. We were taking over the management of the fields, and we're going to improve Bridgeforth Field, Rotary Field, Hinkle Harris, and Bodie Grimm. Those last two fields, primarily for use for Hanley High School, and then the youth programs, Winchester baseball, the Tina programs, that type of stuff. And then we're going to come out and we're going to work on Bridgeforth for Shenandoah baseball, for the Winchester Royals, and then for Hanley High School when there is a time for them to use that field. And then we're going to start playing softball on Rotary Field. They're going to put a lot of money, time, and effort into improving that facility as well. And the biggest thing, the thing that you're going to see the quickest, is the conversion of both of those fields from natural grass to artificial turf infill system. And we're on track to move forward with that on the original timeline. So we are hopeful that the end of this summer, moving into certainly before the start of next season, both of those surfaces will be converted, and that's going to make the increase of playability dramatically. Again, not just for Shenandoah, but for Winchester Royals, for Winchester baseball. All those user groups are going to be able to get on the fields and use them much more often, because you're never going to lose time for weather-related delay.
Wow, that's some exciting news. That's a big deal. Speaking on behalf of the Winchester Royals, as you may or may not know, I'm on the board for the Winchester Royals. There have been many games that have been rained out, and I've often looked down at the JMU facility, Eagle Field down there with the artificial turf, and oftentimes they're playing when we just physically can't. So that's some exciting news. Well, I tell you what, Scott, before we wrap this up, any last thoughts? You were in the league for, it sounds like, about 4 years, if I did my math right. Clearly have a commitment to athletes in not only baseball, but in many other sports. What are your thoughts on what the Valley Baseball League means and kind of how it might fit best with, someone considering playing in a summer league?
I'm really curious, and the Valley League is a long and rich history of quality baseball. And, I think we're looking at with the major leagues and changing their drafting situation and moving from a 40-round draft to a 5-round draft. I think that you're going to see the fallout of that is there's going to be a number of student athletes who are going to stay in school rather than leaving to go play professional baseball. And you're going to see more guys from the high school level, instead of going directly in the pros, are going to go into college. And so I think that is going to increase the level of play in the VBL, because there's going to be more higher quality players out there playing college baseball, and they're going to want to get in front of scouts. And I think there's a finite amount of spots in the Cape, and there's a finite amount of spots in the CPL and the Northwoods League and all those leagues. And so I think the better quality of play, if there's more quality players playing college baseball, that means that there's going to be more quality players for the VBL. And so I'm really curious to see how this improves the depth in the VBL from top to bottom.
Yeah, no, I love that perspective. Hey, while I have you on that subject, any ideas? I mean, what's your prediction for when the baseball diamond is going to reopen and games will resume? Right now, ESPN's airing Korean baseball in the mornings. They don't have any fans. I know Major League is working hard to try to figure something out. Any thoughts on, will we be seeing baseball in the fall? Any idea? What's your just best guess?
I don't want to guess, but I want to say I'm hopeful. I really sincerely hope that we are in a position in this country in which we can start playing games again, start having recreation and welcoming people into ballparks and football stadiums and all those kinds of things. But I think if I guessed on a date, that's all it would be a guess. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a politician. I'm not involved in those decisions. And so anything I did would be just me throwing a dart up against the wall and seeing where it stuck.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that honesty. Listen, it is an absolute pleasure to meet you. I didn't realize who I'd met a year or so ago. I hope you'll forgive me for that. And I look forward to many more conversations with you.
Thank you, Graham. It was a lot of fun.
Hey, Scott, thanks. I really appreciate it. All right, baseball fans, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Valley Baseball League podcast. Want to send out a warm thank you to Scott Musa for taking some time to share with us kind of what it was like for him back when he was the sports relations media director for the league, and also to give us a preview of what's going to be coming in the Winchester area. That facility is going to be amazing, and what a treat for the Valley Baseball League to have not one, but two facilities where they could play when it isn't thundering and lightning. Anyway, great stuff, and hats off to Shenandoah for their support of the community. What an effort it took to make that facility, at least get that facility started. All right, what to look forward to? Boy, do we have a lot to look forward to. We are 15 days, that's this many days away from the start of our season. And you're like, yeah, we know you're not playing any baseball. We got it. Yeah, we're not playing any baseball, but we're going to be bringing you a recap of the 42 best games from 2019. We've got quite a crew in place now. I'm going to introduce you to some of them starting as early as tomorrow. And beginning May 29th, look for a full slate of games with that added layer of analysis. When we watch these games as they're going down live, we're only able to catch so many things. We now have a retrospective of a year to kind of highlight key players, what they did in the season after the Valley League, and what their prospects look like in the future. Plus, there's lots more to go into. Anyway, that said, that's what to look forward to in the coming days. We still have got a lot of great players. Remember, our theme here is great moments, great players, and great games. We've covered many of the great moments with the likes of David O'Connor. We had a nice chat with Mike Garza. We're working our way through the all-decade team. We're trying to line up some interviews with some of the other players that were in the league and some of the players that made it out of the league into the majors. Anyway, we're working on that. We're going to do our best to bring you some great stuff. So do your best to get back here and join us, because remember, the next best thing to playing baseball is talking about baseball. All right, we're going to continue to say this all season, so here it comes. We're wishing you all perfect health, and we're wishing you all a speedy return to the baseball diamond. Until next time, I'm Graham Knight for the Valley Baseball League and all the teams in this league. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you tomorrow night, same time, same channel.